Hello, my name is Silas Kaufman, and I teach here at the Alberta College of Art and Design in the design department, first year studies and second year. I also teach extended studies. Most of what I teach involves analytical drawing, so we're going to be looking at some forms today and dealing with rendering and classical lighting. So first thing I'm going to talk about is my tools. I'm going to be working with graphite pencils. And I'm going to be drawing from this foot, this cast foot over here. And we're going to be looking at the light and darks, the highlights, the tonal range of the foot, looking at the local value, the cast shadow, the core shadows, and the structure and angles of the foot. So there's lots to deal with here. And I'm going to go through as to how I would tackle it. There's traditional methods from atelier salons that would require us to block in as we'd work. I tend to have a little bit more of a free form of that, so that's where we're going to approach this from. Now I'm going to begin today with my lightest pencil. Hopefully you can see this. It's a 2H. So I'd like to start out with a 2H pencil to establish all my angles, because I want to start out light, and I typically draw very light. So the lines that I'm going to be placing might be a tad hard to see. However, that's intentional because I want to cover those lines later, or even if I make a measuring error, I'd want them to be corrected easily. So, and one of the things you want to think about in terms of drawing, and a lot of people don't think about this, and that is that drawing is more about touch than it is about seeing. And that runs counter to what most of us have heard. There's a couple books out there that would imply that drawing is all about seeing, and that it's also about divisions in your brain, that one side's more creative and the other side's more analytical, and that what I'm doing today would be somewhat analytical. I just want to point out that that's been destroyed by science, so that you use your entire brain to draw. I think it's a very valid form of expression. I think that it's somewhat essential for all of us to learn how to draw, particularly in the world that we live in. If you think about it, everything around us before it comes into being was drawn. And being measured and analytical with the drawing allows you to see the world as it is, and I think that that is crucial as an artist or a designer or whatever direction you want to take this. Seeing things fundamentally as they are will allow you to not be fooled so much by the visuals of the world. So when I look at the foot that I have here in front of me, I'm first going to just extend my arm, and I'm going to lift my pencil. I'm going to get a measurement here, so I want to just, I'm going to get my measurement all the way to that angle, onto the ankle there, to the bottom of the ankle, to the top of the cast. Now I'm going to use that, and I'm going to go to the top corner of the foot, and I'm going to measure down. So that's 1. I'm going to put my pencil down on the last place I measured. 2, I'm at 3, and about an 1/8. So that ankle, I know, is 3/8 of that foot. So that's a pretty standard issue for measuring. And also, when I'm doing that, as I reach out, this is almost like touching the object. And in training your eye to touch and then your hand to follow what your eye sees, okay? So the two are one and the same. And then this, the tip of the pencil, becomes the recorder. So this is all about touch, right? So I'm really just going out there, my eye goes like a little beam, a little laser, and it goes around the edges, and this is recording that. So that's what I mean about touch. Now, in terms of art, and I say this a lot actually, is that blind people can actually sculpt, and they can sculpt quite well. And that's because they've trained their mind for touch. So much of what they're experiencing is through touch. So it makes sense that they can actually take clay and feel around and sculpt out something. So that's how I want you to think about drawing, is that it's not something that's flat on a page. The page itself, you can actually move things to a distance and you can bring things to a fore. And this is really a plastic surface that you can change levels within. And so that's where it becomes somewhat important that when we begin, it's delicate, it's light. It's like the wings of a butterfly. We're going to just dance around on the page. Now, one of the things I want to draw your attention to is most people are going to want to focus on the toes. And that makes sense because those are words and we can identify that. We can say toe. Up in this area, to the fore of the foot where the metacarpals are, we don't really look at that and we don't really name that. It's not like little kids are going around going, let's count the metacarpals, within the foot. Nor are they looking to the back structure of the foot where the heel is. And they're not looking at the balls of the feet and how that's landing. So typically when we look at something, we just go for the name and we dismiss the object. So what I want you to do is I want you to actually, when observing an object, stop naming things and purely look at it. So words go away, and then we're just dealing with shape and light and the elements of it. And we're also dealing with weight and pressures and action of it. Okay? So that's where you need to go. Now, with this, we also need to be composing this. So on my sheet here, I need to see that as a window into this object. So I need to be conscious of the size of these forms. Now, I'm going to place the toes down low here. And then I'm going to bring it back to the heel, and then I'll go up to the fore. Now, I need to be aware that I don't want any tension points on my sheet, so I might actually pull the toes down just a little bit. And that's where I'm going to begin. Now, we begin with the larger form. So we begin macro to micro. So I'm just going to strike in some of these angles that I'm observing. Now, anytime I want to see an angle, I'm going to hold it out. I'm going to come back to my page and just check that to make sure that that's what I'm grabbing there. I'm going to go back to before that and capture that. Top of the foot, top of the foot. And those are just little marks I'm making. Now, I'm doing it so light that I can fix them later should they become an issue. And I'm going to go to the heel, back on down. Now when you do this, you'll notice that there's a lot more distance through here than you probably thought possible. Okay, so we're just going to check that distance, measuring it with my thumb. So I might now have a little bit too much, so let's just trim that. And that's why you keep your lines light. Another thing that I'm not doing is I'm not completely outlining it. Like if you notice, there's a lot of places where I'm breaking the line. And that's important. I want to break the line on the page. You don't want, when you're rendering, it's not about contour, okay? Rendering is about the value and the shape. And then I'm going to just find these toes here, approximately. That will change. You always want to expect your drawing to change. Okay, there we go. So we've measured in. I think we got a pretty good established large format to the foot. Now, one thing you want to notice with toes is along the knuckling of the toes, it rotates. It swings in a circular formation or an ellipse. Bottom of the toes also. Bodies move with elliptical forces. So we want to watch how we're placing the knuckles of the toe. We want to swing those up. Swing them up, okay? A lot of early drawers in the game, they tend to want to move things vertically and horizontally. So they're not going to see the swing and the forces through the foot. I want to draw your attention to that so you can see how this foot descends down and then the crush of the toes against the floor. And that's what's interesting about this piece is that's just beginning to happen. Okay? So now that I have this large area blocked in, I'm going to block in a bit of my shape. Go to the ankle here, descend down. Notice that I'm not afraid to go cross contour on the form. Now, typically, most students coming to us, a lot of their experience with anything visual is within the realm of cartooning, and that's fine. I quite like cartoons myself. I just want students to realize that what we're asking you to do is not like a cartoon, okay? Cartoons deal a lot with contour line. They deal a lot with exaggeration of the form. We're asking you to be analytical here, so we're asking you to actually measure in. I'm now establishing this idea that there are planes to the foot. So I've got this line here, it's a rather strong line, and anywhere where there's a plane between the two lines, that is a flat surface. Now that flat surface would indicate a plane, and that would indicate a change in value. So I'm going to just begin to put down some value. And since this is rendering, I'm going to hatch the value in, which means I'm just going to strike in value in one direction. Not the boy band, but value. And then I'm going to change direction down here on another plane. Now, one thing you don't need to be afraid of, this is not like coloring. Like when a lot of people color, they think, oh, I have to stay between the lines. That's very important. No, not so in this case. With rendering, you can shift between the lines a little bit, okay? So you can bring your value and you can go into another value and create cross contour. And what that does is it begins to link up the whole and unify the form. Okay? So don't think, oh, I've established a line, I have to stay within there. Quite the opposite. I would like it if you would see those lines as somewhat more flexible. Now, I know in the strict sense of blocking in, you use straighter lines and a little bit more reserved value because you would just apply the value and then you would come back and apply the core shadow and whatnot. That's not really how I work. I do measure at the start in a classical way, but then I come back in, and I like to play with the form in a little bit more organic method, which means I'm just searching around here now, and I'm beginning to establish my lights and darts a little bit quicker. So what I'm also noticing now that within my foot, there's a couple angles that I'd like to correct early on at this point. One is from this point up here to the heel. Now I notice that my heel, I've kind of pulled it in, and I haven't got the length of the foot through here that I'd like. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my eraser, and this is what's so nice about having light line, is you can just do that and take out an area. That's why it's so flexible. And I'm going to just pull back over here, and I'm going to lengthen, because I'm going to look at this to here on my drawing, and fix that. Now, had I done a really solid contour line for that, that would be a problematic piece to fix. But since it's so light and early in the game, I start to notice the problems I have, and I start to correct. And that also demonstrates to you that that not everything that you put down on the page is so precious, okay? This idea that everything we do as an artist is precious, you need to let go of that. And that's hard for some, and I understand why. I mean, you know, we have a certain ability amongst our peers and our parents, and they praised us a lot, and they've told us, hey, you're really quite talented at that, you should go to art school. And well, here you are, and you're competing with a whole lot of people, and they're all kind of, around the same area you are. And a lot of students begin to really struggle with the idea that the teacher is asking them to change tact halfway through a drawing. They don't like that. I understand that. But it's important that we learn that this is a very flexible thing. You need to be flexible with it. You need to allow the drawing to live a little more. And just every line you put down being so precious kind of stalls its growth. And so we want to change that. We want to be open to the idea that I need to fix what I draw. So you'll see me constantly coming back in here and just fixing things as we go, as I see it. Okay? That's the nature of this. I'm sort of beginning to see stuff along the toe there that I could fix. And that also brings me to the fact that early in the game of any drawing, what you are drawing at that moment typically really, really sucks. And I'm always telling my students, please, draw right now and get all that sucky stuff out. Just get it out so we can see it and deal with it, I think there's always a hesitation in class for students to draw freely because they want to impress some, and then others they've never drawn before, so they're afraid of what's going to happen. They're afraid of ridicule and taking that risk to put down a line. But we have to get in there. We have to get in the fray of this, and we have to begin to build it up. Now, as I draw, I'm aware of time and the fact that you're watching me. And I'm going to try to move a little bit quicker through this. You notice that I'm beginning to go into those articulated areas. We would call the toes. I don't want to call them that, but and we'd want to begin to build up the value within there. Now, those are some complex areas. Now, one of the main complex areas is this upper area here. Like it's all well and good to come down here and articulate the toes because that allows for contour, and we are used to contour. It's the main contact we have with paper usually because we're using contour line to write quite often. But we want to get back up inside the form whenever we can. We want to deal with that. And feet are going to offer us all kinds of challenges. It's one of those areas where we don't practice this. Nobody spends time during the day looking at a foot. But we have this foot, and we're going to begin to build up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to begin to what I call hook in. So I'm going to find an area that I can begin to detail something up here. I've chosen this little pinky on the toe, and I'm going to begin to just build this in terms of value. And so I'm going to just work this one area briefly. And so what I get out of it. Now I'm going in for the core shadow of this. So I'm looking where the value is the darkest. Now keep in mind I'm using a 2H pencil, so nothing's written in stone. Even if I do go that dark, I can still remove this. So I know that this isn't a very traditional way to work in terms of blocking in. Just because I'm blocking in with actual line. So I'm just using sort of a natural way to feel the form of the pencil. Now, one of the things is the pencil itself, as it touches the page, I want to be aware of how it's touching the page, how it's skimming the page. I want to focus in on the feel of that. I want to focus in on the pressure. Notice also I have these white spots on that form. Now, if I look out at the form itself, I'll know that this white doesn't exist because I have this white of the page beneath the foot. So if I compare that to the foot, and I squint my eyes, I'll notice that this white here on those toes is actually about a 10% gray. So I'm going to gray that area down. We always want to be aware of value. So anytime you're looking at it, you want to ask yourself, well, is that actually the true value, or is that just something I have in my head because I would like it to become that? So I'm also looking for what's behind the form and getting that to support it. It's just like if you're a photographer. Photographers tend to look at what's behind the figure. Well, good photographers do. So there's nothing disrupting the shape. Or they Photoshop it out because somebody said, hey, that thing in the distance looks like it's on your guy's head. So we'd want to correct for that. And it's no different within drawing. We want to look for the forms, and we want to correct for what's behind it. You'd be surprised at what you think is dark and actually isn't, or isn't as dark as what you're observing. Now, the pencil I'm using is a 2H pencil. The 2H pencil is a harder pencil. That means that there's a clay body that binds the graphite inside the pencil, and it's that clay body that the content of which determines your hardness. So right now I'm actually drawing with a lot of clay, and it's not releasing the graphite to the page. That's why it's not as dark. Now I'm going to come back in here with some darker pencils after, and we're going to begin to establish that. So I'm just going to start getting my darker shapes to move in here and establish these forms. Okay? I want to become aware of what I have in terms of value. And notice that the value that I'm making at this moment is somewhat of a line. Now don't let that fool you. I'm not making a line. That's a shape. And that's very important to distinguish, okay? A lot of students will just start moving into this and creating shape. Or sorry, line. They're so used to line. But I'm asking you to give up on line for a minute. I'm asking you to make many little lines to build up shape. So a skinny shape like that is not a line. That's just a skinny shape. And there's a big difference there, okay? Now, notice I can do this. I can run my lines through other lines. Because all this is about is, value. So I want to build up the value. You start to see that my toes are beginning to build up with value. So I'm watching my value. I'm looking for core shadow. Now, what is core shadow? Core shadow is the darkest part of the shadow. Local value would be the inherent value to this foot, meaning that if we had optimal lighting conditions from all angles that eliminated hot spots or any sort of differences within the form, we would just see its local gray value, which is what gray it actually is. But because we can't see that, we kind of have to guess at it. We want to look at this and say to ourselves, well, what is the most even value on there? We want to find that and begin to run lines through the form and start trying to find our local gray value. And just go over here. Now we got a plane change along there. It's going to heat up a little bit. Some of my toes I've drawn here might be a tad wide, but we'll find out. I kind of like leaving that room there because it might be something that I'm going to have to come back in and change up. I like giving myself space. In life you can do that, if you're good about it. That's kind of like managing time. I always see like time management as just space management. I know that sounds odd. But it's a big part of what students are learning when they first come to the college, especially if they want to be a designer. It's this idea that you have to manage your time. You have to get assignments done, and done well within the time frame given. And quite often a client, well, they don't really care about your social life, you know. They're going to want what they want, and they're going to want it done well within the time frame that they give you. So what we're trying to replicate here in design is that real world. This is a safe place to experience the real world. And it's easier for me to give you a lower grade than it is for a client to get mad at you or even possibly sue you. Can you imagine that? I wonder how often that actually happens. I'm sure it has. So I'm going to just trim up that one toe a little bit. Now, like, you know, I say, we're all going to want to draw the more articulated area, and I say, don't do that, draw up in here, and then I go down here and I draw this articulated area. I mean, I'm doing that more so to hold the viewer's interest right now, and then also just because I got some stuff I got to work out here. Some of my earlier lines aren't very accurate to me now, so I want to just get in there and play around. Sometimes dealing with the most complex stuff reveals what we've done wrong. So let's just see here. Is that wrong? Well, not too bad. Notice that by blocking in lines and shape, nothing's very committed. You know, nothing, and what I mean by committed is I haven't gone and just struck a line that is so dark that it says, yes, this is that. This is the thing that I see. I see that all the time with students. They can't help but apply so much pressure to the pencil that they say something too quick. You know, it's almost like you're playing poker, and you don't want to reveal anything quite yet. You know, you want to see what else this player in front of you has to give you before you commit to anything, before you raise or fold. You should never fold with the drawing. You know, you should never give up in frustration and get upset. Well, I say never, but I just feel that it should be loose. It should be something that is experiential first, and the stakes shouldn't be so high. Because drawing really is about experience. The more you do it, the more you're going to gain from it. In my career outside of the college, much of the gains I've made in this world have been with drawing, or through drawing, not with drawing. So there we go. I think we're now getting into the articulation of this foot. It's coming together. I'm beginning to see the form down here in the lower area. I'm just going to go up in here and begin to establish a little bit more of this upper area here. Now I'm going to use a lot more broader, longer line because I got a longer plane. Now I just want those lines to go with the action. So if this foot is striking down, I'm looking at the foot for how is it striking down? Like, where are the planes? How are they bringing that force in there? And what direction would that plane make on that form? Now, it's pretty obvious. There's brush strokes on the form that help me see it. I'm gonna preserve a bit of that white there, just because I'm going to need to come back to that. We're going to begin to build up. It takes a long time, you know, and it takes patience. For me, there's no patience involved, just because I really enjoy doing this. But I understand from a student's point of view, if you've never done this, that it can be somewhat like a quiet colorless form of coloring. I hate to say it. And it just really is not something that a young active mind would really link onto in the initial stages. I do think that the more you do it and the better that you get, the more fascinating it becomes. I've always been fascinated with trying to find the form, though. I'm sure there's a few of you who are like that. Okay, so once again, rendering is different from regular drawing in terms of how it's done. I mean, we're beginning to see the results here. This buildup of line. There's going to be a lot more involved in these later stages. However, I just want to point out that you have to see it a little bit more than just cross-hatching. And that might be what it appears to at this stage. Appears to be at this stage. However, it's more of an interaction between the tip of the pencil and the page. You want to see how the two are interacting. You want to be very sensitive to that point. And you want to really start to look at the weave of the paper. Now, the paper that I'm drawing on is a very hard, well, not very hard, but a harder surface paper. It's a very smooth paper. So we're not going to get a lot of texture here. So that's going to allow for a lot more even placement of the graphite. Now, if you were working with a cold press paper, you're going to have a lot more texture to it. And that's going to pick up a lot more texture. And that's going to change the drawing and the look of it quite a bit. Okay? Okay, so I'm almost at that point where I want to start to get a little bit more aggressive with my image. Now this part to the heel is dropping off, and that's where I'm heading towards this edge on the page. So I actually don't want to bring that to the edge, otherwise I'm going to cause a tension point there. But I still want to indicate that this is a plaster cast foot, so I'm just going to begin to apply value underneath there. A big thing to do is to draw exactly what's in front of you. Like if that is part of the foot coming off there, I want to indicate that to my audience. In this sort of study, in analytical drawing, you want to search for what is exactly in front of you, the truth of the drawing. We can get expressive, that is fine. The works that I enjoy the most are very expressive. However, I think that this analytical drawing is foundational, and I also feel that it is, I feel that expression is the result of doing this. If you look at people who are successful at drawing and painting in their field, I mean, this sort of, they've spent a great deal of time doing this, and they've invested in it. You'll inform all aspects of your work. Okay. Once again, it's going to take some time. You just got to move through it. This isn't the sexy part of drawing at all. It's a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of time. So we're coming in. I've got some stuff now. It's going to lead me around the foot. So I'm going to go to a darker value at this point. Now I'm going to choose, I'm going to move up to an H pencil. Now I like to sharpen my pencils with an X-Acto knife, but I also brought in a pencil sharpener today, just for speed and ease. And immediately you'll see that my drawing starts to sharpen up when I start to apply this. But having a good quality mechanical pencil sharpeners, I find really valuable when you're doing this. It saves time, and they get a really nice point. It's just that they can be costly. But if you're serious about rendering, this is what you're going to need. Invest in your tools. I'll use that in a sec. Okay, let's go back down here into the toes. I'm just going to begin to articulate a little bit more. Now I'm really looking at the weave of the paper. And by the weave of the paper, I'm looking at the pits within the paper. I'm looking at how my pencil begins to interact with that. So I'm moving in here, and I'm looking at the subtlety of the form. And I want to use contour, but I want to use contour once again as sort of a form of shape. So if I apply contour to darken down here and bring out those whites, that I want to be like a shape. So any sort of line that I'm laying in there, I think of it as a shape. I'm sorry, I just want to trim that a bit. Once again, because I haven't put down a contour line, I can push my lines around subtly. I'm in more control of the drawing. Nothing I've done earlier within the drawing is causing me too much stress right now. In fact, all that I've done earlier is adding to the drawing. Let me come back in here. Another thing is I can imply line by just moving the pressure of the pencil a little tighter and a little firmer towards the end there. So I begin to build up one area. And then I'll just pass that value forward. I'll just run some lines up into the form. And then back over here. Now, trust what you see. Do not allow the form to push you around here. And then you start to just say, oh, that's too hard. And then you start to name things. And then you stop drawing. Because you wanted the underside of a toenail there. You want it so bad that you'll establish a line. Try to resist that. Just trust the value of the piece. Read the value. Once again, I'm searching for shape. And graphite has a clay body to it. And one thing I'll begin to notice is how the clay body in these pencil hardnesses change. So in the 2H pencil, it tended to glide over the surface a little more. And it gave me a little bit more control. This one, the H pencil, I can feel it grab a little bit in places. I can feel the mix of the graphite and the clay changing. So as that occurs, you might get a little bit of grab. And that's just where you'll feel subtly the tip stick against the page. So a slight, strange sort of resistance as it hits new clay pockets and forms. So I want to use that if there's a way, I want to use the medium differently. I Once again, I'm worried, like, did I draw this toe a bit too big? Well, let's just see. If I measure back, I might be able to trim off a little bit more of a millimeter here. Remember to resist that urge to go straight up and down. There's a nice angle on that toe there. So I want that to develop naturally. And I'm going to measure down the side of that toe. It's about halfway where this other big toe will begin. And we're going to begin to establish the value of that. Notice how I've skipped over this one just because I want that white. I want the value behind this white to really punch that. So I'm just going to skip that over. Bring out that on the toe, and then I'm going to see what do we have here. We got to build up on that nail right here. It's really going to push the form back. Move out the form, back in. Now I'll go back down in this toe and I'm going to grab some more of that value. It's quite a big drawing, you begin to realize, like when you draw at this scale, it's going to take a lot longer, and that's because you got a small tip and a big page. So we want to try to move things along just by speeding up the stroke of the pencil, but still keeping it somewhat light. I'm now going to note that behind the foot there's some value against that wall, and that there's a seam to that wall. So I want to begin to bring that out. Because the value behind can support the value in front, you know, so long as they're differing values. And that wall seems slightly darker. So I'm going to bring up the local value of the wall. Now I got to be careful as I put down line here, the lines are going down rather dark and that leaves a white space next to it. So if I hatch back over a line, I'll just be increasing the value of that line. So what I try to do when I hatch is I try to aim for the areas that I haven't drawn, because there's always those little spaces between the lines that you've left. So that's where I'm going to try to place my value. It only makes sense. Another thing is, if you make a mistake, do not try to correct it by drawing. I often see students who make a mistake and then they just keep drawing on top. And that's not good, because what you're essentially saying to the viewer is, look here. You know, you're creating a focal point. So if you've made a mistake, just allow it to be a mistake, or erase it, or just draw over top of it. I mean, and whatever you do, don't scribble it out, because once again, you're just pointing out to everybody that in your opinion, you've made a mistake. Just let it be. Especially in a sketchbook, you don't want to do too much scribbling or playing with it, because that will reveal to people that, you know, you're insecure about these things, or that your drawing is without as much confidence as you'd like. Now I'm going to trim up the floor of this foot here a little bit through line. Notice I don't draw over that dark line that I've already drawn. I'm just going to build up the wall behind this foot. And then I'm going to back off. And once again, the drawing is plastic, so I want that to come out here. Okay. Now watch this. You can do this too. Just rub it with the edge of an eraser to soften that up. Pick out some of that information. Come back through and begin to reestablish. Okay. The one thing I want to look at here, from here to there, I feel that that might need a little bit of a trim. And I'm talking like a millimeter or so. Now, I can mess with measurements all day. I would love to do that. I know we got limited time here. But I just want to trim that up. I'm going to bring the ball of this foot just a little bit more forward. Allow that to sit. Now let's keep in mind too that I'm drawing from real life. Now drawing from real life is different than drawing from a photo. Photo has made a lot of the decisions for you. I mean, it composes it for you. It also is a single lens, and you have two. You have two eyes, which is seeing this three-dimensionally. So your brain also has to find ways to compensate for that three dimension because you're seeing two actual points of view of it. Meanwhile, your brain also has to find ways to format this. So you really want to imagine when you're looking at the page, is it becoming too tense? How can I place things better? But that all has to kind of occur at the beginning, but you can always be shifting stuff around. Or learning from what you've done wrong. Like if things have moved up too far here, become aware of that so you can correct it on your next drawing. I'm just going to bring some value up over here. Now there's a strong sort of box-like change in direction on a plane here on this toe. I'm going to just begin to bring that out. Darken down. Be aware that this is casting back in that toe, so I don't want to go too dark in there. And I want to catch that white. Because the plaster cast has given us a little bit of a white outline. So we want to be careful not to draw over that. Okay, now I'm going to change up to a B pencil. I'm actually going to use my sharpener for this. I find the softer I go, the more accuracy I want on my pencil tip. Which is hard to maintain because you're losing more pencil tip when you go softer. You'll also notice that I'm just adding in subtle amounts. I'm not going really hard here on this. But I do want to darken up some of these coarse shadows. Now I'm trying to darken it up by going in direction of the form. Usually I'm keeping all my lines the same direction. Now I'm changing that. I'm moving them with the direction of the form because I want to begin to lead the viewer's eye around the form. Okay? So I'm imagining in my head that I'm on that form and that my pencil, as it's touching the page, is striking that form, not the page. So I'm allowing the form to dictate the direction of my pencil. And all the information I want to draw this is over there. So, the majority of my time, I should be looking over there. I shouldn't be looking at my page too long, no more than 5 seconds, before I want to glance back and draw more. Now, younger drawers, when they first start out, they end up looking at their page far too long. And they begin to stop really observing the foot or measuring the foot to any degree. They start to allow their mind and words to take over. They start to seek control, and then pretty soon the drawing is no longer what's in front of them. and begins to get away on them. So we want to avoid that. Now, another thing with rendering is the time that it takes for you to just fill this all in, the time that it takes for you to handle a page. It can take a lot of time and effort. That's why you never want to be doing these assignments the night before, because you will not get it rendered dark enough. So if you're watching this and thinking, oh yeah, I'm learning this, I can do that, that's not a problem. That's fine, and I hope that it all comes through. I just want you guys to realize that it all comes through 3 days before, really. Give yourself some time to correct things. Give yourself the time that's needed to sit with the piece a little bit and just ask yourself, is that really what I want representing me in the crit? It's always good to constantly question your own work and ask yourself the harder questions, you know. How can I improve this? What would take this further? I don't know. I'm just curious. How's my other one looking? This toe is not as good as this toe. And that I just want to push this toe down a little bit. Because I really like how that one's coming out. And also this toe. This is the great thing about erasers. It's actually really important that students understand that the eraser is your friend. It's not this thing that just comes in and corrects mistakes. It's actually something that can pull out value and spread it around. Bring about a little bit more realism. Yeah. You get to see the form a little bit more. Soften things up. Might really soften it up. So I'm still feeling like that angle is a little bit forced. The old saying, and Don Kaufman might have said it too, a millimeter is a mile. I always like that. It's true. You know, like things that we thought were so or just so happenstance and doesn't matter actually become very important in the work to create that accuracy relative back to the piece. You know, so we want to observe and closely measure. Everything in place here. So I see a little piece right there. Changing my mind direction. So this is why students never have these things done on time. It's just how laborious it can be. And the dedication it takes to actually complete one of these. We've looked at angles, we've looked at planes, we've looked at value, we've looked at line, we've looked at ways that we can draw the foot differently than just contouring, and we've looked at ways to build up the value in terms of classical lighting, which is local value, highlight, cast shadow, and core shadow, as well as reflected light back onto the form. When you are at home drawing, please be aware that this does take a long time. Like an actual plaster cast foot like this might take several attempts. And it also might involve you giving up some of your social life to do this. But if that is what you want to do in terms of character design or illustration, it's very valuable that you understand these principles and that you learn to enjoy them over time. And best of luck with the drawing, and hope you all get a good one.